Whether you're playing on a budget or you just love being the underdog, Rogue tier decks are a valid way to play the Pokemon trading card game. I personally am a very competitive person and I love to win. That being said, there are Rogue tier decks that I love to play that are just different from the meta decks that also give me the opportunity to compete against anything in the game. And if you're like me and you like to dabble in the Rogue decks from time to time, I've got a list here of some of my favorite Rogue decks to play. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about some of my favorite Rogue decks from this past year. Up first is Arceus VSTAR with the Charizard, like all the Charizards. Now, Arceus definitely not a Rogue tier Pokemon, but the Charizards definitely haven't gotten a lot of play. However, they have a lot of upside here. Both the Charizard VSTAR and the VMAX. The VSTAR is able to hit for 230 damage. If it's got some damage on it with a choice belt, it's hitting for 260. And the VMAX was super cool because you could throw 3 fire energy from Arceus, put on a double turbo, hit for 280 damage, and heck, you could even just charge this up with Magma Basin as well, hit for 300 straight up, and with a choice belt, go all the way up to 330 damage. This deck hits really hard, is a ton of fun to play. You've got Radiant Charizard here as your closer in the event that you need to uptrade towards the end of the game. This one was a ton of fun to play. This list, keep in mind, I don't think I've updated this since Brilliant Stars. I would probably throw in a Serena or 2 in here, but I just wanted to show the list here, give you an idea of how this deck is built, and it's a ton of fun to play. And now that water decks have kind of receded a little bit in light of Lugia Mania, there might be a little more room for this deck to work. And you may want to get in here quickly because Charizard VMAX is rotating soon. One deck that I'm still shocked didn't catch on is Hisuian Goodra VSTAR, particularly in the context of the Lost Zone engine. With Hisuian Goodra VSTAR, you can hit for 200 damage and take 80 less damage in the following turn, which is absolutely nuts. And you've even got the Moisture Star VSTAR power to fully heal one of your Goodras. And with the Lost Zone engine, you've got a lot of versatility. You can dig through your deck with Comfey, grabbing the cards you need. Cramorant in there for that early game attacker. You can also even use Radiant Greninja as a snipe attacker. And I think that one of the things I love about this version versus the Arceus Goodra variant is that you have answers to Miltank. And yes, maybe in a tournament environment, you're not running into that many Miltanks, but when you're playing online in PTCGO in particular, you see Miltank a lot, and that Arceus Goodra deck just loses to any Miltank deck whatsoever. And with the Cramorant here, and to a certain extent the Radiant Greninja, you've got some answers in there as well. I also just find this to be really fun to play, and a lot of decks just aren't ready to take on Goodra. So I would highly recommend, if you've heard about Goodra, Arceus Goodra, please try play not Arceus Goodra, play Lost Zone Goodra. This deck is good, I promise. Charizard is back, and I know Charizard's going to be on this list at least one more time, but bear with me on this one. Now, take out the Goodras, put in Charizard instead, and you've got a really fun deck with all of the tricks of the Lost Zone engine, Comfey, digging through the deck. You've still got access to Cramorant for that early game damage. You've got Sableye for the snipe damage. You've got Radiant Greninja for the snipe damage as well. And then you've got 2 crazy attackers in Charizard VSTAR hitting for 320 damage if you use its VSTAR power, which you're more likely to do in a Lost Zone deck where there isn't another VSTAR you're competing with. And then Charizard VMAX, which can hit for over 300 damage with a choice belt over the course of multiple turns. Absolutely nuts. And we're powering all of that up with Mirage Gates. I played this one during the Extra Life Marathon, and I did it for fun, and then we ended up beating some of the biggest decks in the game with this deck, and it was so much fun. I highly recommend checking this out, and again, especially with Charizard rotating soon, you're gonna have to get in here quick, though I guess you could just play it straight up with the V-Stars, and this would be pretty good too. While Palkia V-Star headlined the game for much of 2022, Dialga V-Star, its partner in crime, kind of receded into the background. It wasn't quite as good or as versatile as Palkia V-Star, but it was a ton of fun to play, especially when you were able to pull off Star Chronos. And yes, getting 5 energy on a Dialga was tough, but when you were doing this with the Mew engine and you're just cycling Mews in and out of the active with scoop up nets and the metal saucers and stuff, it was so fun to try and build that combo up in order to get the 2 turns going. Now, it can be inconsistent. There are times where Star Chronos hitting, taking out just 2 prizes or knocking out a Pokemon V by itself isn't good enough. But man, this deck was a ton of fun to play. You can also play this in the Lost Zone version, and I know that Dialga is kind of on the outs right now. This deck is pretty fun to play. I'll scroll down so you can see more of the list. I wouldn't count out Dialga going forward because there are multiple ways of getting a bunch of energy on here, from the Kling Clang in, I think it's the Silver Tempest set. Magnezone's out there too, and who knows what other metal support we're going to get going forward. But as a rogue tier deck, Dialga V-Star absolutely fits the bill. Hisuian Zoroark V-Star is kind of straddling the line between competitive and rogue tier. It's had some success in competitive play, however, and it's also a very popular deck as well. However, it kind of hasn't hit the competitive ceilings as some of the other decks in the game, such as a Palkia or an Arceus or a Lugia or anything like that. However, I think it is a ton of fun to play. It can score big wins against some of the best decks in the game. And the reason I'm flagging it here in my list of rogue tier decks is that I play it a little differently than most people do. I think after that one tournament where the quad DTE build became the standard, everyone kind of moved away from other types of energy in Zoroark. And I personally have always liked the water build with a couple of water energies, which allowed you to get full damage off your Zoroark. You're not taking a penalty for the DTE. You're putting in draw support and extra energy attachment from the likes of Melanie and Radiant Greninja. And also we're able to work in Empoleon, which at the time of the Lost Origin meta was really important to have for shutting down all of the Lost Zone stuff. So I don't know if you necessarily need Empoleon now. It's still not the worst because Lost Box is still decently popular, but I personally have always preferred playing Zoroark with the water package. This is my favorite way to play Charizard VMAX, and that is with Lugia V-Star. And yes, Lugia is an incredibly strong Pokemon, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting in this deck, and Lugia is in and of itself is not a rogue tier deck. However, when you pair it with the off the off meta Charizard VMAX, it does become a little bit of a different beast. And why I love playing this is that it allows you to quickly accelerate Heat Fire energy onto the Charizard, turning this into a juggernaut with 410 HP, being able to hit for 300 plus damage on multiple turns. Yes, this deck dies completely from Temple of Sinnoh, but it's so much fun to play, ripping multiple turns of hitting for over 300 damage between Lugia and Charizard. It's pretty awesome. One of the most popular videos on my channel is the video with Shadow Rider Calyrex paired with Mewtwo VSTAR. These two are kind of a match made in heaven because Mewtwo VSTAR gets energy acceleration from Shadow Rider, and then Shadow Rider gets a 2-prize attacker that can hit really hard, really fast with Mewtwo VSTAR. Mewtwo is able to hit for up to 300 damage with a Choice Belt on the second turn, and then that kind of covers the fact that Shadow Rider is kind of a slow deck to start. And then in the long game, Shadow Rider can come in, clean up any messes, while also being a 320 HP target. And this one is a lot of fun to play. I don't know if it's my favorite Shadow Rider Rogue deck on this list, but it is definitely a ton of fun, and I think personally my favorite way to play Mewtwo as well. I've also tried Mewtwo within the context of the Solrock Lunatone engine, which I think is the way the game wants you to play it, and I hate that deck, and I never made a video for it despite people asking me, because I think that deck is awful to play, and Mewtwo actually makes Solrock Lunatone worse. But in the context of Shadow Rider, I think that Mewtwo makes Shadow Rider better. When the Deoxys VSTAR and VMAX came out, I was experimenting with both of them, and then I found a combination. When I used Star Force for the first time and one-shotted an Arceus VSTAR, I was like, wait, this is the sauce right here. And Deoxys VSTAR with Shadow Rider Calyrex is a pretty killer combo, kind of working in the same way as Mewtwo VSTAR, where Deoxys is that heavy-hitting two-prize attacker, particularly for its VSTAR power, but it's not as guaranteed as a Mew. Yes, it's only one energy, but you're dependent on your opponent having energy on there as well. But you can load this up with 3 energy, no problem, with Shadow Rider and get these massive one-hit KOs, which was a lot of fun to do. And this list was made a little later than the Mewtwo one. This one has the Espeon to protect against effects of attacks such as the Sableye shots, the Amazing Rare Eviltal, and Giratina, and so on. And this one, if you're going to play Deoxys, is a pretty fun way to do it. And if you've got a Shadow Rider League Battle deck, yeah, putting in some Deoxys to spice things up is pretty sick. Dark-type Pokemon should be more prominent than they currently are, but one of my favorites is Hisuian Samurott VSTAR. For only 2 energy, it can hit for up to 220 damage if your opponent's Pokemon has any damage already on it, and I love this build with Bibarel as the draw engine, a handful of Zigzagoons, and a whole bunch of nets. And I loved playing this variation of the deck because it felt pretty consistent. It wasn't that hard to get the spread damage on there. I loved having access to more cards. Yes, a lot of people were playing this with Shady Dealings. I personally prefer the Bibarel just because it drew more cards, and Shady Dealings I always felt was a little too slow for this type of deck. And Samurott with the Bibarel engine is always going to be my favorite way to play it. Now, at this point in time, I don't think this is the way to play Samurott. I think there is so much ability stuff happening in the game that particular build is going to be tough. However, there is a Weezing Samurott build. I'll show this one on the screen. So you're kind of getting a bonus deck here where you use the Weezing to put on poison, and then when you need to, you bring in Samurott to land that finishing hit. And this one doesn't have the draw engine of Bibarel, but this is a way to make Samurott work. And when it gets going, I think Samurott can be pretty good. And last but not least on my favorite rogue tier decks, this is my current obsession, Regidrago VSTAR. This one is so cool because it's got the Apex Dragon move where it's able to copy the dragon moves of different dragon type Pokemon in your discard pile. And I've got my version set up to be able to copy Appleton's Thick Mucus to one-hit KO Lugia. I've got 220 Shred from Duraludon VMAX. I've got one-hit KO potential with Giratina VSTAR, and the ability to hit for 200 damage and take 80 less damage with Goodra. Now, the concern I always had, like in theory, was how do you cover the energy cost with 2 grass and 1 fire? And on the channel, we made videos covering the Leafeon build, an Arceus build, and one with Leafeon and Rillaboom, and I personally like the Leafeon and Rillaboom together, where Leafeon gets you that turn 1 attachment, and at some point in the middle of the game, you get Rillaboom set up to be able to accelerate 2 grass energy to anywhere on the board, especially when you get it going and you can accelerate energy to the active and you can land multiple lost impacts, which is something that the Leafeon by itself with Gardenia just cannot do. And I absolutely adore playing this deck as my go-to rogue deck at the moment. those are some of my favorite rogue decks from the past year. What are some of the rogue decks that you love to play? Let me know in the comments of this video. I would love to hear about some of the underdog decks that you enjoy playing in the Pokemon trading card game. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. And some quick plugs before we go. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In Third Person. You can also find me on Twitch at In Third Person, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And of course, check out the website for inthirdperson.com for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. All right, I got to get out of here. My wife came in the middle of the video. She didn't know I was recording, and she brought some popcorn with her for me to enjoy. So I'm going to go and enjoy this right now. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.